heard some things.
What things you heard?
I heard some things.
We are live. Holy manoli. Usually I say something after that, but it doesn't apply tonight. Welcome to episode 6. Chris G is in the chat room. We are live on YouTube. Thank you, Chris G. I hope you Cars fans are joining me. Come on, boys and girls. Get on the YouTube and interact with one truly, Mr. Edward Geik, Cars aficionado, as amongst other things. We are going to basically, we're going to commentate this next hour or so and talk about the Cars, a group that certainly has made a big impression on me. I've often said I am an expert on this band, not the expert, but I am an expert. And I guess I have to start off with my qualifications of being an expert. This includes, there is one example. I am about 17 years old. I am now 60. So if I do some quick math, that's 43 years ago. That is on the senior trip. I have a water pistol and an evil smile. Apparently a nefarious teenager. You would think from that photo I would grow up to be a serial killer, but no such luck. I turned out to be a pretty decent human being. So there is, I remember this hat fondly. I'm also wearing a Shake It Up t-shirt from the same year, I think 82. And I saw the Cars at the Nassau Veterans Coliseum with Nick Lowe and the Chaps opened up for them. Nick Lowe from Cruel to Be Kind and great songwriter, wrote What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, a hit for Elvis Costello. And I remember being very cold. I remember my grandmother who sewed that patch onto a generic hat because they didn't actually have Cars hats back then. The merchandise, or as merch as they call it now, was not as prolific. So that's one of the many qualifications. I discovered the Cars when I was 13 years old, which be 1978, 79. I had heard a lot of them. The Cars were kind of a bridge, and we're going to talk about this book, and it's addressed in the book. We're going to talk about a book that's recently come out about the Cars in a bit. The advent of FM radio. AM radio was, basically Casey Kasem, pop hits, that were making the Billboard Top 40. And FM radio was starting to play alternative artists that maybe weren't doing so well in the top 40. And in the book by Bill Janovitz, he discusses this. And this is a main point, because the Cars without FM radio would have never broken. FM radio was instrumental, not just with the sound that the Cars brought, but the fact that their initial album was an FM masterpiece. Basically every song being played pretty much off the first album in heavy rotation, which seemed for years, not just immediately after the release. And the follow-up of their second album, Candio, which it kind of blended into that whole thing. Like, when I was younger, I was like, well, what songs are off Candio and what songs are off the initial self-titled release? Because, we didn't have the internet back then. You had to go to the record store to figure out what was what. And a lot of times you go there and the album wasn't there. You're going to looking for the Cars and it's all sold out. So now I don't know what you're looking at that time. Maybe a Talking Heads album or a Supertramp or a Foreigner album. And you're like, oh, and you didn't have a lot of money. Again, I'm not going to do the whole, back in my day, we didn't have a lot of money. Every generation has that. And at that time, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but I probably would think that an album went for like $6.99. And a 13-year-old at Geic, $6.99 was not viable until I got that paper out in a couple of years, and I had big money, big money. But so, I immediately got to know them through FM radio, and they were perfect for FM radio. They were tremendously perfect for FM radio. And before I get into the whole cars thing and take a deep dive, the cars community has been something that has been a part of my life since probably 1996, when the internet was still kind of a fledgling thing. We had AOL chat rooms, I think, maybe. I don't even know if we had it back then. It wasn't a lot of communication. You couldn't really communicate with people. I think they had a thing called IRCQ or something. There was something where you could chat and there was topics. There was a gentleman from overseas, and again, the memory blurs. I believe his name was Christopher Eakins or Elkins or something. I'm sure one of the stalwarts of the cars community can refresh my memory. I wish you were here live, but I guess you're not. So this is interactive, which means you should be here interacting with me and that young man to your left there. So anyhow, I'd like to thank the people in that community, because this guy from overseas started a mailing list, which was basically, let's see, we're getting a new link here. Let's see. Let me just check this private chat. You gonna? Oh boy, get out of here. Okay. Ballinor, can you pull up that link again? Send that link to me. Oh, it's on Discord. Okay. All right. Let me just give me 1 second here, folks. Please indulge me because I want more people to interact with this as possible. And that is, yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. Just hold on 1 second. Yeah. Be right. That's it. Okay. Going to my thing. Bobbity boop. We'll get you here, folks. Just deal with me. All right. Boop, 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 boop. What do I have? Paste here. Come on, dopey. There we go. New link. All right. Okay. That's in her group. Let's see what we got. One more time. Chris, did you see a new link in the? The one that I just posted? I just posted another one. We got an up.
The one I gave Chris is the same I gave it to you.
Okay, the one Ballinor gave you is the same one. Okay, we're good. All right. Thank you. Both my producer Ballinor and my wife, Vera. There we go. So if you want to join us live, feel free. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the people that really. This was a mailing list, the Frozen Fire mailing list. Got to give a big shout out. It was basically a email forwarding system that this guy had set up that we could communicate within Cars Fan. You would subscribe, and you would get in your inbox, in your email, a topic or a view on some of the cars, and some of the people that contributed to this were phenomenally influential for me to access all cars things, including bootlegs and pictures and opinions. There were two people that were very instrumental, and they actually developed their own cars podcast called Night Thoughts. That was David Curry, and I'm trying to remember the woman's name. It might have been Grace or Donna Sweet Purple Jane. One of those women were very instrumental in this podcast, and it went on for quite a while. And these people were very instrumental in keeping the cars in the loop, even pre Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Uh, this was, to have a conversation, to have people, and to tape trade and video trade. Also, a big shout out to John Mortis. John Mortis he's about as idiosyncratic as you could get, but this guy is a wealth of information. I cannot even pretend to retain half the car's info that this man has. I wish he would have came up to me. He was at the Berkeley book signing of the book we're going to talk about, and I wish he would have came up and talked to me. I'd like to meet the man that some of us I look up to as far as Cars fans, and the fact that he actually has a lot of this stuff in the physical form. Also, Brian K. O'Malley, who passed away a couple of years ago, got to give a shout out to him. He was a contributor. There's me. There's a picture with me and Rick. That's at CBGB's in 2005. I'm a little more baby face there, and that was not the highlight of me and Rick. I don't have pictures of the 1997. I met Rick as well at the Knitting Factory. We'll get into that as well. At growing up, like we go back to the other picture, I was the ambassador for the Cars. I had to defend every album, defend their lack of movement on stage. I was the de facto guy in high school, and junior high. When an album came out, I had to hear about it and justify it. And for the lack of a better analogy, a lot of people felt about the Beatles or Dylan. And again, I'm certainly not going to put these guys in that category. But for me, that's how I was into this band. I don't know why they spoke to me. I think it was the new sound. They didn't look like rock stars. They were, they were different looking. They all brought something to the table musically and physically. Okay. So they were kind of nerdy, but they were heavy. They were rock. So that appealed to me. The synthesizers definitely appealed to me because I was not into prog rock at that time. Later on, I got into some bands like Rush and a couple other bands, but the way they were using it was almost in a whimsical and scientific way that I really dug. Now, I'm going to have some opinions on this show, and I have nothing but love for the remaining members and the deceased members. These are only one schlub's opinions, and I have critiques. And listen, I'm sure there are people who are Beatles fans that have critiques on John and Paul or have critiques on George. And this is just the way I feel. It's nothing personal. I have the utmost respect for all the guys who ever played in the Cars. I think most of us would say everybody was an essential member for the Cars sound. Whether Rick wrote the songs, whether everybody was a major contributor to the overall sound. So with that said, I really also want to thank Grace Penchoud. I hope I get these names right. Allison Merson, the people who are running these Cars groups on Facebook that are so popular, for allowing me to advertise on their Facebook groups live. You people, I'm really wagging my finger out here, but you should be joining me live. Okay, so let's switch to the book. So a book came out, I guess, about a month or so ago, uh, called "Let the Stories Be Told" by Bill Janovitz. This is the definitive book about the Cars. No doubt in my mind, I've got criticisms about the book. It has nothing against Bill Janovitz. This is what I do as a fan. I'm not blindly loyal with thinking everything with the Cars was total gravy and total genius and total, like, you know, really, I don't think there's any group that really is flawless except maybe the Beatles. And even then, I'm sure I'm not in the Beatle lexicon, so I don't know if Beatle fans hate this song or this album was weak. I can't imagine it, but I'm sure there's always some contrarian out there to speak about stuff. Um, Bill Janovitz is in a band called Buffalo Tom. I'm not familiar with them. I have no. I know he's written a book about Leon Russell. Leon Russell is not something I would ever listen to, but I'm sure it's a fine book. This is a very voluminous book. It's a long read, and that that's kudos to Bill, because to do a deep dive into this band with a lot of stuff that's just never come out, mainly because I don't know if the other band members were just like, I'm not going to say this in public, and or just nobody ever asked. Because if you think about the Cars, you got like 78, and by the time they call it quits with all the, you know, with the original members, or at least with Ben Orr, it's 1987. So you have a 9-year window of the Cars, and then they're gone. Which is, it's not like we're talking about Led Zeppelin here, or again, bands with big catalogs. And the Cars released albums almost every year until Door to Door. So they pumped them out, and that's how they used to do it in the old days. You had to come out with albums, and at a fairly good rate. And the Cars were good for that, because they would record at least the first two albums in very short amount of time. And that speaks to their working with producer Roy Thomas Baker. So we've got the Bill Janovitz book, and I guess I wanted to talk about. I guess we'll talk about the band members initially. Um, we'll put the band photo up from Panorama. It's the 4-shot of the band, and a very unusual photo, because right here you've got 4 of the 5 band members up there, and Greg is playing a Casio keyboard or some form of that. I'm not a tech head. I can't tell you exactly what he's playing, but I believe this is on the song Dangerous Type from the second album, Candio. I did not see this tour, and I'm really kind of pissed I didn't see it, because it had the best selection of songs, really, from any tour, because the Panorama songs were a departure for the band, sound wise, and thematically. And so, and then you, of course, you had the drumming of one David Robinson. David was, I think, a very capable drummer. One thing always interested me about him, he played a Slingerland drum set, which I rarely saw any rock drummers playing. I wish I would have had the chance to ask him at the book signing. I wound up asking him about a quote in the book where he said that, what did he say? He said Benjamin Orr was not too bright, the bass player. But he didn't mean it like in a really bad way, I don't think. I think he meant that he just was not interested in the business side. And this is a main theme that comes up in the book, is as a lot of things in life, it comes to be about money, and money was an issue. Uh, so there we go. I can see some of these coming. Uh, David was very humble, and I felt David was very um, forthcoming. He's a no bullshit guy at this age of his life. He was a guy that I thought was, you know, he definitely had that Massachusetts vibe, that Boston vibe, although he's not from the Boston proper, where he is going to take you to task, which I found really, really interesting because the cars were in every interview, it's like no straight answers. They're very flippant. They're not going to really give you the real skinny. And it was actually annoying because you try to find out some information. And a lot of, again, the people that interviewed them were also culprits to this. They had to stay on their talking points. And David was very instrumental in a lot of things. He's the one who came up with the band name. He did a lot of the designs of the stage for a bit. He came up with pretty much all the album covers. He was much more than a drummer. And he also was one of the first drummers that was kind of pushed into, and I would say pushed into, but had to become familiar with electronics and programming drum machines and doing the such, which at that point was considered a very taboo thing in the rock industry. Again, the Cars, about the time he started doing this, were kind of transitioning. They were still rock. They weren't a pop band yet. I don't think that pop really comes into play with this band until probably like Shake It Up. And you have Shake It Up and Since You're Gone, get heavy MTV reputation. And then, of course, the advent of Heartbeat City, which becomes this MTV juggernaut. And you're releasing 4 or 5 videos from songs on that album. And which really increased the popularity of the band, but really alienated a lot of the guys in the band because the subject of these videos were, as my producer Balinor so lovingly describes, String Bean. Rick Ocasek becomes the focal point of all these videos, and the other guys are kind of like left in the backdrop. And shooting these videos, there's a lot of waiting around, and so it became kind of a sore spot, amongst other things about that whole Heartbeat City era. So yes, you saw a picture of me with Rick Ocasek at CBGB's. I also got a chance to meet with Alan Vega, who's the guy putting me in the stranglehold in this next picture. Yes, Alan was a very interesting guy. He loved poetry. He was one of the originators of New York City punk. He was one of the first guys to play CBGBs. He played, he was New York as New York could get. And he was a really good guy. And Rick Ocasek was obsessed with Alan Vega. I mean, he thought Alan Vega was the bee's knees. Alan Vega was a very confrontational on stage, a sweetheart off stage. As you can see, he's putting me in a chokehold. And I basically asked him before this picture, let's just do something crazy. And he obliged me right away. Again, this is taken at CBGB's in 2005. And Alan Vega, along with Martin Rev, were part of Suicide. The band Suicide was I don't know how to describe them. It was techno punk. I don't know. The name escapes me. Industrial punk. I don't know. It was keyboards and Alan, basically doing doo-wop, rockabilly. I mean, it's hard to pin down what they were exactly, but big time influence on Rick Ocasek. And I think a lot of the other band members were just like, we really don't get this. And there was a lot of stuff that other band members were into that were different from what Rick was doing. But the Cars actually kind of did gravitate towards some kind of influence from Suicide, although I think it was much more palatable than Suicide or Alan Vega's solo projects. So yes, I got to meet Alan Vega there. I met him previous to in 1997 at the Knitting Factory. I'll tell you a little story about that. In 1997, Rick Ocasek came out with I can't say it's a solo release. It was him, Alan Vega, and oh my God, I can't remember her name. Anyway, she was a writer, I think, a Rolling Stone. Gillian McCain, I think her name was. And they had a show that was advertised in the Village Voice as Rick Ocasek. So, of course, I bought the Village Voice because I would look up the shows. I wanted to go into the city. That's what I did as a young man. And I went to the show. I went to the show with my friend Joe, who I'm still friends with today. And we go to this show, and we go in, and there's no band set up. It's just a couch and a TV. Well, it's New York City, and anything goes. You don't know. Sometimes there's going to be a little. And I quickly put together that he is not going to do a musical show. He is going to do his poetry from the album Get Your Tickets, which was a very avant-garde type of thing, especially for a Cars fan who thinks it's going to be some kind of music or, just, there's some curse words. There's kind of like topics that are like, a little bit, how do I say, the graphic. Okay. I enjoyed it, but I make no shames about it. I was a Rick Ocasek devotee. Still am to this day. Again, I don't put him in like some upper echelon of musical geniuses, but I respected the man as a musician. I felt like if you could come up with this many songs, and again, even with the Cars contributions, it's very hard to write a song that people are interested in. So the fact that he had the framework or the skeletons of songs, and then they were made better by the group, to me is still some kind of a genius. And I felt like Rick genuinely wanted to explore other things. I don't get his motive. Like a lot of people say, well, his solo stuff. Now, I think he was definitely worried about making money off his solo project. But this particular album was not going to sell anything. You had to be just a diehard Rick guy. So I go to this show, and Alan Vega steps up. Gillian McCain steps up. And I guess he starts playing like this techno, like pulsing kind of beat with a synth. It's going boom, yeah. And he starts doing like his poetry over this. And Alan Vega looks very disinterested. Gillian McCain looked like she was nervous as hell. She didn't know what the hell he was doing. And he basically had pages and pages of poetry like this. They had pages and pages of poetry. Rick had. I remember he had one called Leg Show, which I found out later was like a fetish magazine for. And he was very obsessed with legs. If you think about his lyrics, a lot of songs about legs and shoes. Very, very. So anyway, I remember that. So anyway, so he stops. And everything stops, and he invites the audience to come up and do poetry. Wow. This is my big shot. This is my, I'm a big Rick fan. I got to take it, right? My friend Joe's like, push, come on, you got to go. I'm like, and listen, I am not shy. Okay, I can tell you that much. Would be even. It was very cool to be there. It was, and it afforded me New York City afforded me a lot of ways to meet Rick because he had moved from Boston to there, and so a fan who had obviously seen these Village Voice ad, Rick Ocasek, guess expected music. And Rick invites people, like I said, to come up, grab the mic, do his poetry. This fan, I guess, grabs the mic from Rick and just says, "This fucking sucks. I thought there was going to be music here," and slams down the mic. I started laughing. I thought it was funny. And then Rick picks up the mic and, like, in the calmest voice I can't even do it justice, says, "This does suck. Maybe we should have done music." And just totally dismantled the guy's fury in one fell swoop. But then I said, "I'll do some poetry." Well, I have different recollections than my friend Joe has this. We took pictures of this, but it's not, it was the days of the Kodak disposable camera with some cheesy flash on it. And it was a dark club, and you can see me, and you could see me reading, but you can barely see Rick. That's why I didn't bring the picture up. But you could see the couch and all things. So maybe I'll dig the photo up if I find it. And I went on, and Joe describes it almost like Jesus, like with his outstretched arms, handing me the mic. And I went on, and I read his poetry, and I'm not kidding you, for a good 15 minutes behind this techno beat. It was, again, and then after I ran out of his poetry, I started freelancing like Cars lyrics, I remember doing Dangerous Type, whatever. So I guess I can promote the fact that I actually played with Rick Ocasek, even though it was in this poetry form. And then Rick just kind of left, and the music was still going. And then Alan Vega disappeared, and the whole show fell apart. It was just me. And then the lights came on. And it's funny because on a later episode of Rockline, when I called in, I asked him about would he do another poetry show. And I remember the producer was not familiar with this offshoot Get Your Tickets project he had done, and was like, had to ask Rick like several times, "There's a guy on the line wants to talk about your poetry." And then he finally said, and they let me on. He goes, I said, "Is this a one-off? Are you thinking about doing it again?" And he said, I definitely would like to do it again. So, all right. So that's a little bit of background on where I am as a Cars fan. I met him several times. I would not say we were friends. I would ask him a question. That would be it. And he lied to me. He lied to me at that CBGB's. I asked him before he went on, "Do you get nervous?" And he says, "I never get nervous." You find out in Bill Janovitz's book, he was mucho nervous, especially towards the end. He was a nervous type. But again, I would be too if I had to hide as much stuff as he did as a person. And we can get into that later. All right. So just recently, like I said, there was a book signing at the Berkeley School of Music. Greg Hawkes and David Robertson were there. Bill Janovitz was there. I had the privilege of asking a couple questions. Also, the book was signed. I got the book signed by Greg and David, I think, and the author. It was at the Berkeley School of Music in Boston. Really nice event. I have to say, I got to give kudos to whoever put it together. The only thing is, I would have had some people organize the signings, which I guess they didn't expect because Greg and Dave were overwhelmed by fans who wanted him to sign everything. And it's a little bugaboo with me. I don't like harassing these people. People want memorabilia and signatures. You snap a picture with me, I'm fine. I don't need you to sign every album they ever made. It's just not my thing. Um, and I've never been starstruck, so I treat these people like they're regular people or regular musicians. I don't get like a, I've seen some crazy things, even with Greg Hawkes. I saw him at Daryl's house, and there was a gentleman there that was like, I mean, he had serial killer all over his mug. He was like staring at Greg and going, Greg, I really love you. Greg, no, I love you. And I'm standing behind this gentleman and I'm making like the side eye and rolling my eyes at Greg because Greg, I don't think he knew how to handle this because he said love way too much, if you know what I mean. Real big fan. Love you, everything you do. Love. Anyway, so at the Berklee School of Music, I ran into Maxanne Sartori, who is instrumental in the Cars being the Cars. This is a woman who played their demos. There's me and Maxanne. She's looking at me adoringly. I have no idea why, but she was a hell of a nice woman. Um, she's a little disabled right now. She had a hard time walking, and I was making sure that she could get to the front because she's the person. I mean, I think Elliot thanked her in the or several cars thanked her personally for catapulting the Cars at their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame speeches. So mad props to her. I recognize her because again, not the expert, but one of the experts on the Cars. So just a wonderful person and really. As a matter of fact, I saw her in '84 when sorry, that's my other podcast. In '84, when the Cars played Forest Hills Tennis Stadium, she introduced them, if I believe, which was a pretty good show. So let's get back to the book and let's talk about some of the issues and things that I feel like were left out of the book. I guess, again, this is not a criticism. I don't want anybody to take this. I'm just saying there are certain topics that I would have liked to know a little bit, and they might be minutia to other people, and rightly so. Maybe that's why they were left out. I guess the first major issue I have by Bill Janovitz is the dismissal of the second side of Shake It Up, which was their fourth release. That album, I know I didn't prepare my my producer here, Balinor. If he can dig the album cover up for Shake It Up, which was their fourth album, and their last with Roy Thomas Baker as producer. Bill described the second side as pretty much filler, except for Maybe. And now I talked about this in the trailer for this show, and I think I don't know if it was the lack of. Let's see, we're going to Shake It Up here in a second. There it is. There's the Shake It Up album. Another model that David Robertson dated. He dated the woman that was the Candy O. That was the second album was that picture of her on the car. He dated the woman Candy Moore. This young lady, I do not remember her name, but he dated her as well. David got a lot of women back in the day, and why not? He was a good-looking dude. He still is, and he got a lot of tail, as they say, in the music biz. So Bill claims that the second side, if you can go to the back of this cover, if you can find that, Balinor, with the song titles. He dismisses the second side. Now, I don't know if Bill just got tired of going track by track, because he does this exclusively in the first two albums. He goes track by track. Panorama, he kind of takes his foot off the pedal a bit. It's very hard to go track by track. There we go. There is the fourth album. Cool pictures. Look at that. Very Cars albums are well done. You can still see the Warner Brothers sticker there. Now, if I wanted to take this track by track, I could. I don't think I want to do this on the initial broadcast. By the way, you're watching I Heard Things, episode 6. We talk about a lot of different things. We decided to dedicate this show to talking about the Cars. You're talking about some songs like A Dream Away is an awesome song. In 84 on the Heartbeat City tour, this was part of their set list. It was one of their better songs. Surprisingly really good. I really appreciated the drums in this much more than Maybe Baby, which is singled out by Bill. This Could Be Love is Ben Orr in his baritone best. The keyboards are extraordinary. The solo is like 30 seconds long by Hawks here. And it's just a phenomenal dark song. And then you got followed up by another Benjamin Orr song, Think It Over, which again was incredibly good live on the Friday show that they appeared on, in which Ben is playing a keyboard along with Greg's keyboards. And it's just a great, fun song. And I don't consider it filler in any way. I mean, it builds to the live versions of all three of these songs are extraordinary for the Cars. They pulled them off very well, considering there was some, you're dealing with a little bit of drum machine stuff and some coordination done with the technological side, not as much as they did later. That's right. Natalia Nedved was the lady on the, what was her name? Medved? Something like Medved. She was Czech or Romanian or something. Yes, she was on the first album. Again, we'll get to the first album. I just want to address. So I don't know what he did, and then he says Maybe Baby, which was the standout song. Now there's a couple ways I go with this, is because this song was left over from the Panorama album, and it was Be My Baby, and basically was the same song except for maybe an edit early on when the drum machine starts. It's the song is pretty much there during Panorama. There's very little difference, and the version that was an extra track as it came out in the expanded edition of Panorama, and the drums are very monotonous. Yes, this is Panorama. This is the third album, and I love this cover. It's just fantastic. Everybody holding a guitar. That's how it should be. I believe Greg is holding a Breadwinner guitar, which was actually David's, the drummer. David is wearing his checkered flag vest, which I think he got when he was in England, visiting England as a young guy. He was very familiar with the mod look that was going on in England and brought it back here. And just a great photo. And in the touch and go video, this starts off on the record player. So it's just a great album. And just to speak about albums in general, there was a certain smell to a new album. I know this sounds really weird, but the newness of the album and the photography on an album, it was an experience that added to the music in some way. Because what else you have to do? You listen to the music. All right, you're doing other things, but you're looking at the album, you're looking at the guys, you're saying, "Oh, this is a cool shot." And there's a whole story about how they got these shots with the big shadows. I asked Greg Hawkes about it, and I think it was David Robinson and somebody else kind of coordinated how they got these large shadows next to their actual bodies. It was a certain way they bent the background, as I remember. So, yes, that's Panorama. And Maybe Baby was a leftover track. And Maybe Baby is the drums, although pronounced, are monotonous. I mean, that's, to me, there's no changes. There's like 2 or 3 drum changes in that whole song. And it goes on. And yes, there are some guitars and some, you can actually hear some sax and Maybe Baby. I think Bill really hyped up that track because David Robinson really he cooperated with writing the book. That's what I think. Because I can't see if I had to pick one song that I could do without on that album, it is Maybe Baby. And the Cars, who were known previous to closing their albums with a really heavy, good song, this fades out. It's a little too long. It just doesn't really work on a lot of levels for me. I mean, the lyrics aren't really that intriguing. So found out it maybe just listen, you don't want to go through every track and dissect every track. It's very tiring. I did this for a digital fanzine way back in the 90s where I reviewed the first 3 albums. And I'm telling you, to go track by track and break down every song, lyrics, music, and stuff like that. It's a hard thing to do. Plus, she was Russian, Medvedeva, Natasha Nogudinsky. Yes, I believe she's no longer with us. I believe that, but again, I might not be. So okay, so that was one issue I took with the book. Again, this guy is writing a voluminous um, expose, what have you say, on the car. So of course, some things are gonna miss. Died in 2003 in Moscow. The great Balinor, who's assisting me here as my producer. Much shout outs to him for helping me out here tonight. So one of the things I want to know, which was kind of like a very small thing, but there was a contest in 1984-85 on MTV called The Private Affair with the Cars. Now, again, I'm 18, 19, whatever I am. Basically, the Cars would come to your house and perform live in your backyard. Well, what don't I love about this? All my friends could see. They know I'm the champion of the band at the high school. They know I'm Mr. Cars. I wearing that baseball cap every other day. I'm, I got my car shirt, even though it was a bootleg car shirt, and the logo was all screwed up, and you had one washing. You remember how you get buy those bootleg shirts? They lasted like a day, but I had to buy it, and I have a lot of money. I wound up buying it. So it was me with a water pistol too. I was up to hijinks that day. So what was I saying? Where was I? Oh, Private Affair with the Cars. Now, Private Affair with the Cars was a big deal. Now, the only way you could go and get I'm going to say lottery ticket. The only way you could enter this raffle is you would have to go down to your record store. And I remember going down to Sam Goody, which was one of the more popular record stores around the country at that point. There you go. Is that footage from the? That's when they won the MTV Video Award. They won the first MTV Video Award and they beat out Michael Jackson's Thriller. I think it was the only category that he didn't get that year for that album, and they won that for the You Might Think video. Which apparently nobody liked. The Cars themselves were not. They liked the video, but they hated the video process. Just did not like it, and I could see it. Sounds looking back at it, it seems like it's just a bunch of shit, you know. But they got such recognition from that, and I'll get into that later about the whole Heartbeat City era, that they became, I wouldn't say household names, but you couldn't turn on that station without seeing a Cars video. There's no way. And everyone had a MTV, the new release or whatever they used to call it, premiere video. It was like 4 or 5 songs that were being premiered on there. And we could also discuss in later episodes, if we want, the merits of MTV and was it good for the music industry, looking back at it. Well, the MTV private affair with the Cars, I went down to Sam Goody's and I saw a stack of these entry forms. Well, I couldn't wait. I grabbed the whole stack. And I went home and I filled out every one. I must have like 35 entries. I'm thinking I'm going to have the Cars in my backyard. This is going to be great. Well, I lose. Now, the Cars are a group, for the lack of a better word, it's hard for me to say this. Even with the performers of the day who are arena rock, hey, welcome to Detroit, we love you, and Spinal Tap-ish, they didn't play long on stage. Okay? A minute, an hour 20 at most, and you're done. Now, at that time, you had to play 2 hours, especially if you're playing arenas. And they weren't the most. And, I also don't buy the whole Rick Ocasek negative theater type. Like, we don't want to be like the typical rock band. We want the audience to interpret us the way. We don't want to prod the audience. I think that's one of the words he used. I don't buy it. I don't buy it in the long run. I feel that this was a Rick thing. He did not want to perform. He didn't like it. I don't know if he was nervous about it. I don't know. I think the fact that he would be on stage for 2 hours was not something he wanted to do. I feel like other band members would definitely be into hanging out for 2 hours. And I do hold this against Rick in one regard, because as an artist and as a group that is prolific as the Cars and brought so much joy to people, and I hate to get high and mighty here and philosophical, but I almost feel like you would be a very selfish person. Again, this is in my opinion, if you didn't want to share this joy with people. There are so few artists and musicians that can bring this to the table, to the people. And I know they don't owe us one damn thing. They don't. But if I were gifted, as these guys were, and as Rick was, I would make sure that I gave the people what they want and was able to have them leave the place smiling and feeling like they got their biggest bang for the buck and they were smiling and dancing or cheering the entire time. This is the way I am. I mean, I have a piddling little band, and that's my mission, is to make sure everybody has fun and has a joyful experience. And I feel like Rick, because of his hangups, and some of his insecurities and his stubbornness. Now, I know you're not supposed to talk about ill of the dead, but I was making this call when he was alive. I felt this way, and also would have made the Cars a lot of more money. So getting back to this, so I felt like, okay, now the Cars are coming to your house and they're going to play, and they played at a gentleman's house. He was from the Northeast, I think. And they played, and they showed little clips of it on MTV after it was done. I would have been very interested to see how they reacted, the Cars playing at this guy's house, like, in an intimate setting, just to maybe, again, you don't have to do a whole chapter on it, but I would have liked, okay, let's hear about this little thing that it fascinated me. It's something I wanted as a Cars fan. But again, this is a well done book. Again, I'm nitpicking, but that's what I do. I got to nitpick. I mean, there wouldn't be a show. There wouldn't be I Heard Things show if I didn't nitpick and have opinions. So you have that. There was also a chapter. I feel like Rick Ocasek's solo stuff was kind of dismissed too readily by the author. I felt like it was put in a light where it wasn't commercially successful, so it wasn't equal to the Cars. And especially with the first solo album by Rick, Beatitude, which, except for maybe one song, couldn't be more of a departure from the Cars at the time. In retrospect, you say, well, the subject matter was quite different. More of his poetry kind of showed. It had different themes. I mean, sure, there's songs about love on there, but there's also a song about, the end of the world. There's a song about nuclear, missiles, and and there's a song, Jimmy Jimmy, which is about kind of a kid that is kind of disenfranchised, kind of that tie up to the song from Panorama, Misfit Kid. And it's interesting. It was different. It was different in an era where solo albums were kind of frowned upon. When somebody did a solo album, that usually meant the band was breaking up. But the Cars were able to do these because they had bought a studio in Boston called Synchro Sound, and Elliot Easton, the guitarist, recorded a solo album, Change No Change. I don't think Benjamin Orr recorded it Synchro, but I think Greg Hawkes did too. His Niagara Falls album, which again, I enjoyed all their solo albums to a degree. I found Greg's pretty interesting, just because of the sounds he could come with. I mean, he is probably the best keyboardist that ever lived. I mean, there's only a few guys I put him in. The innovation, the whimsy, which I don't think many people bring to their keyboard playing, and just his arrangements, which he should have gotten credit and gotten some money for co-writing and arranging and producing. You find out in this book that he was a crucial member, and I figure all the Cars should have gotten much more money than they should have, but with the caveat that with a man in the band who primarily writes all the songs, there had to be that conversation where they approach Rick and say, listen, we got 2 albums, we got one album under our belt, we want songwriting credits. So they would also share as a band in the money that I think they deserved. But for whatever reason, they never had that conversation that we've had enough. They never got together. I think after the second album, they've kind of went off in different directions. It often happens with bands that they're really close. You're playing the clubs, you're getting all tight knit, and then as you have some success, you kind of drift off, and you're not in the same room, and then people start talking, and what have you. They should have had that conversation, and they never did. And except for Greg getting some residual checks on some songs he co-wrote, most of the guys were shut out of making money off, you know, uh, you know, of royalties. So that's that's addressed in the book, and like I said, the book is wonderful. It's wonderful, and you get to know the foibles and the problems that the band had behind the scenes, which is so interesting to me because before Bill's book, there were only really two things that I went on as a Cars fan, and one of them being the Frozen Fire book by Toby Goldstein, who I think wrote for Rolling Stone magazine. And that book has great pictures by Ebbett Roberts and also tells a pretty good story, but not behind the scenes stuff, just recording stuff. And a Goldmine article that came out, and which reported about as detailed account of how the Cars finally broke up, what happened. It was vague, but at least I got, one guy was touring in a bus, the other guy, the rest of the band was flying. There was some tension there, and the thing just kind of fell apart mid-tour, and that was it. It was a small meeting about whether the Cars should continue. They said no, without Rick, nah, we're not going to do it, which in retrospect, they should have done. But again, hindsight is 2020. So there you have me, a young age. And the Cars got their start in Boston, which I think the author really goes into the Boston scene at the time. If you want to, I'm very familiar with the New York City scene. I found it very interesting to hear about the Boston scene and the Massachusetts scene and what was going on at that and what artists were prominent. A lot of these bands I have never heard of. I think one band was the Dead Boys, or I had no, again, I'm only a kid at this time. I'm 13, 14. I'm certainly had never been to CBGB's at that age, and I certainly wasn't going to be at the Rat. Now, we have a picture of the Cars performing at the Rat very early on. Let's see. Yes. No, that's not it. That's Rick jumping up. What do we call that? He's doing. I wonder if that's him. It actually says it's the two guy photo, the two bass players, as you call it. One was a bass player, and actually one was a guitarist. A black and white photo. Nope, that's the first album. Inner sleeve. There we go. There it is. You actually can see the Rat in the background. That's Elliot Easton. And there's some guy in the lower left there screaming his head off. Elliot Easton, who was the youngest member of the band. He was significantly younger than Rick or Ben. And that's just a lot of light in the book to me about how I don't want to use the word immature, but he was, I'll use the word, because he was. I mean, who the fuck knows what they're doing at 20, 21, 19, 21, fuck knows. And then you see Benjamin Orr, bass player, playing, I believe, a Rickenbacker bass, really gives you that deep end, And the Rat is where they cut their teeth. The Rat was kind of like the CBGBs of Boston. It was a dive. I remember talking to Alan Vega's wife, who Actually, I think she still lives in New York and plays out once in a while. Uh, and she was like, when we were at CB, she goes, "This reminds me of the early days of the Rat." And I said, "Yeah." I go, "I never had a chance. I was too young, but um, this was also the Rat was short for the Ratskeller, or the Ratseller, Ratskeller, I believe. Don't know what the origin of that comes from, but as you can see, there's a Cars banner, which that logo was designed by the drummer David Robinson, who again uh, was an important part of the Cars and kind of left out because just the feeling of the day once you went to Atlantic Drums, um, and stuff like that. He did so much more, and there's actually a point in the book where he is going to be fired, and he basically, I don't want to say begs, but he pleads with Rick to not fire him, and which seems to me unconscionable that you would fire a guy who came up with the name, who uh, is part of this band, that in order to get it the new flavor of the month. And Stephen George, who was the drummer for Ministry in both their kind of new wave synchro sound album with Sympathy, and then appeared on Rick Ocasek's solo albums, and then was with Ministry when they hit big in the industrial metal. And Rick did gravitate towards younger musicians, and I think kind of in a psychological way, because he was much older. And it's pointed out in the book that he kind of wanted to be a father figure to these younger bands and take them under his wing to kind of, I don't know, maybe preserve his own personal fountain of youth. He was hip, this and that, to keep that kind of uh, image going. I mean, he's not here to defend himself, but you find out when people are hiding so much stuff, and stuff that's very core to your being, and we'll get into that maybe at a future show. um it's tough to, as on a human level, to relate to some of this stuff. It's just, but I guess celebrity, and being in the spotlight and wanting something so bad, like he wanted to be a star so bad. He did not have an alternative plan. I don't think Benjamin had an alternative plan either. um when they first started out, um as we found out, David could do a lot of things. um the other two musicians were Berkeley trained musicians. They would have been, uh Greg had already playing with Martin Mull. He could have been a session musician. He could have been hooked up with any band at the time. He was just a multi-instrumentalist. Elliot, he was a fantastic guitar player. I mean, he could play blues and rock and roll, and later on he did. He he toured with Creedence Clearwater Revisited. He played on a lot of tours, and these guys had to do that in order to make the money that wasn't there from their residuals or their royalties, because they were left out of the songwriting credits and stuff like that. So the Cars got their start at the Rat. They sold out many shows there. They sometimes did 2 shows a night. And again, they're a club band that really never got to transform themselves in to a arena band. They just did not tour heavily. One time they toured internationally. One time they went to Tokyo. That's about it. There was some talk about doing some dates in Australia in '84. Never came to fruition. We'll get into their management as well, maybe on a later show. But very talented all around, these guys. But Ben and Rick especially had been together for many years in many other bands, and they were determined to make it. Rick was determined to make it, and Rick at the expense, I think, of some other people in the band. Again, I don't apologize for saying these things. This is what I got from the book. Again, get this book. If you don't have it, Let the Stories Be Told by Bill Janovitz. I wanted to show a little bit of the video. Now, I don't know if this is a promotional video, and the Cars were at the forefront. When MTV first came on the air, they needed videos. And the Cars were shot videos, promotional videos, because they would pop up on Midnight Special. They would pop up on uh, the shows that did like Night Flight. You would see the Cars, and again, Devo started this really well at the forefront. Devo, because they were art majors and they were the art and the video was hand in hand with their music. They cared about both and their message, which, if you watch the Devo documentary, which I definitely think you should, you could see that these guys actually believed in de-evolution, that this was what they believed in. And in a way, if you look like the current state of affairs, they may be right. We are de-evolving, in my opinion. So the Cars had a lot of promotional videos of this. So MTV scooped them up. I think they had 2 videos in the first 30 videos MTV ever played. And weird variations. This is a double life video in which there's live vocals, but the music is canned. I don't know who came up with this concept. And then later on, you'll see a double live version where it's just straight album track, not live vocals. So they had a lot of videos for MTV when they first started. And I was always intrigued by this video. Was this video, it was just what I needed, which it would chart in the top 40. I believe it did. And this was their hit, man. This is their, signature song. They closed most of their sets with this, especially on the first couple tours. And we're going to take a look at this. It's kind of a strange video, and we'll close out the show by looking at this video here. This is fancy. I don't know. This looks too big to be the Rat. I wonder if this is like the Boston Pirate, but the ceiling is really low in this. And there you see Rick there, and then these people standing down. I don't know. I can't imagine like dancing to this. Now, this is around the disco era, so you guys see Ellie with the big lapels there. And then Benjamin. Benjamin was always very conscious of where the camera was. You see this later on live performances. He knows, because he had started with the Grasshoppers when he was a teenager, and he knew how to work TV. And yeah, that's basically the video. And if anybody out there, again, I wish more people would have came in, and I hope they were able to find us, but maybe, or even in the comment section, tell me where you think this was. I think it might be described in the book, but listen, I'm getting old. I can't remember everything. I mean, the Cars I'm pretty good at. I got a pretty good memory when it comes to that. So that's the Cars, kind of a starter episode of where I am as far as the book, as far as, my relationship with the Cars. I've gotten to meet Greg Hawkes and talk to him. I'm sure he doesn't remember who the hell I am, and that's fine, because again, I'm in music and people say hello to me and I don't know who the hell they are. Oh, I saw you at this show. I'm like, and one of the good things about Greg, one of the most affable human beings you're ever going to meet. One of the nicest guys ever to come down the pike. And I like the fact that Greg and his band Eddie Japan, he still travels with his original synthesizer. And it's funny because you could see he's been a side band all his life. And I wouldn't say he struggles, but it's a little awkward. But it's endearing awkward. That, when he's got to do his talk ups and he's got to, it's funny on his set list, you could see like song, Greg talks. Song, Greg talks. Like, It's not the most spontaneous thing, but it's very informative because he'll tell you a little bit about the car's journey and some fun facts, which I think adds to the performance because again, there's just so many of us are going to read this book. And the casual fan is not going to read this book. So the fact that his shows, which musically are very good, um, they do a wonderful job of recreating the Cars music. As a matter of fact, last time I saw them, it was on Long Island, and Elliot Easton's brother was sitting right behind me, and he sat right on stage right, which would be stage left if you were in the band, judging one of the guitarists in Eddie Japan's band to see if he was up to snuff with Elliot. Now, I thought it was kind of funny. I think he was half joking anyway. He wasn't there to critique. I know he went backstage to say hello to Greg, but it was interesting. And listen, is it going to be as good? I don't know. I mean, I always say, like, you can play Elliot Easton's guitar solos. You can play them. Okay. But could you come up with them? That's the genius. To come up with a solo that is strung together with almost like a mini song within the solo. That's talent. And that goes for any guitarist. People say, oh, I can play Eddie Van Halen. I can play it. Yes, you can play it here. But to come up with that is the true artistry. So I would recommend anybody to go see Eddie Japan. They do a very good job. And there's some other cover bands out there that I enjoy. There's a band called Drive that's around here locally that I've seen a couple times over the years. I always feel like with these tribute bands, the only thing they cannot get right is the keyboards. Because Greg just sets the bar so high that it's his wizardry cannot be duplicated. There's so many things going on. And the last thing I'll say before I leave you folks, one of the things I want to say about early on when I was a Cars fan, I couldn't afford speakers on my stereo. I know everybody's saying, oh, the old days. So a lot of times I would have just one speaker, and I would only be able to listen to the Cars in one channel. And the first first 4 albums, really, there are things going on one channel that are not going on in the other channel. So you hear little things. Then I would switch it to say if I went from left, I would go to the right channel. Then there are parts that aren't in the right channel that were in the left channel, which was amazing to me because all these little idiosyncrasies in the song became more prevalent, or parts became more prevalent. You just hear the click rhythm of Rick's guitar, the little muted click stuff, but the guitar would be missing. It's almost like the Who song, Pinball Wizard. If you hear the beginning, the acoustic guitar is going in one channel and that is going on in the other channel. That's how listening to a Cars record was for me. I would listen to it in different channels. That's how crazy I was till I got 2 speakers. And then I was like, oh, best of both worlds. But I'd still want to hear what's going on one channel and going on another channel. Well, we've come to the end of our time here. An hour and 20 minutes I've talked. I've filibustered about the Cars. We got to get more people in here live. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to do this unless more people come in here live, because I got a lot to talk about the Cars, and I want to share it with you guys. I want to know your opinions. It's a near and dear subject to my heart. If you want to watch what I have to say about other things, we usually do this at Thursday nights at 7 p.m. We talk about a lot of different topics, a lot of retro topics. We don't talk politics or sports because the internet is inundated with that shit. And I have no inkling to do a show about that. I'm already doing one show about hockey. So I've had enough of that practically. I mean, I enjoy it, but it's just, I've been doing for that for almost 16 years. And this is before the advent of the podcast. Now everybody's got a podcast. Your dad's got a podcast. Your brother-in-law's got a podcast. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank all the groups that let me broadcast this and will let me re-air this on their channels. The moderators, the administrators of these have been really kind to me, and I really appreciate them, and I appreciate all of you. And I hope that you join me on episode 7. And if I get some good feedback, we'll continue where we've left off. I want to thank Balinor, my producer, did a fucking awesome job, as he always does. And he's tired. He didn't have to do this. So I appreciate him. I appreciate my wife chipping in with some nuggets of information, helping me along through this broadcast. And I hope to see you on the flip side, so to speak. So good night, everybody.